Welcome, everyone, to this Bright Talk session, which is brought to you by the Storage Networking Industry Association. The SNIA works to develop storage-related standards and has about 3,500 members from over 160 companies. You can learn more about the standards work done by the SNIA by going to snia.org/technical. During this Bright Talk session, we will talk about the release of the SNIA SMIS 1.8 specification and the changes and improvements it brings to the Storage Management Interface standard. My name is Deel. I am a Senior Standards Technologist at NetApp, and I have been involved with the SNIA for many years. I am the co-chair of the SNIA SMI Technical Work Group, which is where the SMIS specification is being developed, and I'm also the chair of the SNIA Storage Management Initiative, which is sponsoring the work on the SMIS specification. My role here today is mainly to help get things started, and I will also help handle any questions that you might have. The person actually giving the presentation today is Mike Walker. Mike is a former IBM engineer and also the former chair of the SMI Technical Work Group. He has been involved with the SNIA for many years and has repeatedly been instrumental in moving the SMIS standard forward. He has authored and edited many parts of the SMIS specification, and when it comes to SMIS expertise, it would be very difficult to find anyone more qualified than Mike. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask during the presentation, just type them into the Bright Talk Ask a Question box. I will collect the questions and we will answer them during a Q&A session following the presentation. We expect to have about 10 or 15 minutes for that session. If you would like to get a copy of the slides, you can find them as an attachment associated with this Bright Talk session. Also, some of the slides of the presentation might contain a lot of detail, so you might find it useful to expand your view to full screen by clicking on the expand icon near the lower right-hand corner of the display. And with no further ado, I will now turn things over to Mike for the real presentation.
Thank you, Don. The purpose of this presentation is to provide an overview of new functions in 1.7 and 1.8. These are the two releases of SMIS since the last time SNIA offered a CTP test for SMIS. In addition, we'll be telling folks to go directly to 1.8, and we will explain why. But first, let me provide you with a disclaimer. There were a lot of changes in 1.7 and 1.8. Many of these changes had nothing to do with introducing new function to SMIS. They had to do with editorial changes, miscellaneous cleanup of the spec, and promotion of SNIA classes to SIM classes. This presentation is focused on the actual functional changes that were introduced in 1.7 and 1.8. In general, they fall into the categories of new indications, new methods, new properties, and new profiles. So first, we will look at the new functions that were introduced in 1.7. They were updates to the block, file system, host, and common profiles books. So the block book added new indications for health and space management in the block profiles, and it also added storage pool diagnostics, which is a new profile. So let's look at those in more detail. The new indications on this chart and the next one show new indications added to array and storage virtual profiles of the block book. Most of the indications on this chart deal with health of various components of block storage system. Most of them are alert indications indicating when a component, such as a disk drive, a fan, a power supply, a controller, or a volume, has failed or gone degraded, and when it has been replaced or returned to service. There's also a new indication on the changes element name for a computer system. On this chart, there are more health indications and indications for element name changes. but there are also indications on space utilization. There's now an indication for changes in the number of blocks for a storage volume and changes in remaining managed space of a storage pool. In addition, there are alert indications and capacity issues for storage pools. These alert indications existed for thin provisioning environments but have been extended to cover regular storage pools as well. The last three indications report on health of a logical disk. Now, the new profile added to the block book is Storage Pool Diagnostics. This profile was added to provide diagnostic information on storage pools. The profile specializes, which means it's based on, the DMTF Diagnostics profile and provides detail on operational status for any storage pool. The operational status property of a storage pool will tell you when something's wrong with a storage pool, but it won't tell you what is wrong or why or what can be done about it. Tests may be run on the storage pool that will tell you these things. When a test is run, the summary diagnostic record is saved and associated with the storage pool the test was run on. This is so clients may find out information without rerunning the test. The main takeaway from this presentation today are the tests that can be run on the storage pool. There are 5 tests, which are summarized as follows. The status test is used to verify the health and possibly change the status of a storage pool. The self-test is used to evaluate the health or change the status of a storage pool and the elements that support it. The RISI test is used to determine the elements that contribute to a non-OK operational status of a storage pool. RISI stands for Related Element Causing Error. In the case of the RISI test, this includes identifying elements that caused a degraded status. The impact test is used to determine what elements that are based on or allocated from the pool are impacted by a non-OK operational status. This would be storage volumes and other storage pools. The actions test is used to determine available options for clearing a non-OK operational status. The corrective actions would be vendor specific. That is, there's no list of standard corrective actions. So the next book is File System Book, and like the block book, there are new indications on health and space management, and there's a additional DMTF Simple Identity Management profile that was added to file export. So let's look at those in more detail. The indications that were added to the block book were also added to the file system book. This chart and the next chart look very similar to what we saw in the block book. These new indications were added to the NAS head and self-contained NAS profiles of the file system book. Like I said before, they're similar to the indications that were added to the block book. Most of the indications on this chart deal with health of various components: disk drive, fan, power supply, controller, or volume of a NAS system. And most of them are alert indications indicating when a component has failed, gone degraded, and when it has been replaced or returned to service. There's also a new indication on changes to element name to a computer system. On this chart, there are more health indications and indications for element name changes, but there are also indications on space utilization. There's now an indication for the number of blocks for a logical disk and changes in the remaining managed space of a storage pool. In addition, there are alert indications on capacity issues for storage pools. These alerts existed for thin provisioning environments but have been extended to cover regular storage pools as well. And the last three indications are on the health of a logical disk. The simple identity profile was added to file export as a mandatory related profile. The simple identity management is a DMTF profile. It manages users and user groups and their privileges on certain elements in a system. When applied to file export manipulation, it is used to manage user and user group access to file shares defined by file export manipulation. The methods to perform the management of this are in the account management service. The simple identity management profile is a mandatory component profile of file export manipulation. However, the functions may be subset as defined in the account management capabilities. In the host book, there are two memory configuration profiles that have been added. These are two brand new profiles. The first of these is the memory configuration profile. This profile describes memory resource pools which serve to group memory resources with like characteristics. Raw memory modules down at the bottom are grouped into resource pools. Visible memory is allocated from resource pools and are actually based on the raw memory. The capabilities of a resource pool is defined in the memory capabilities. The management functions for this are in the memory configuration service. The capabilities of the service are in the memory configuration capabilities. The next memory profile is a persistent memory configuration profile. Persistent memory refers to non-volatile memory. Persistent memory configuration profile describes the model for managing persistent memory. The persistent memory service provides for allocation, deallocation, and modification methods that operate on persistent memory. The capabilities of the persistent memory service are defined in persistent configuration capabilities, and the capabilities of a resource pool are defined in persistent memory capabilities. Allocation requests utilize visible memory to create concrete system addressable storage extents represented by the persistent memory namespace. Now the last change in 1.7, a new WBEM server profile was added as an alternative to the SNIA server profile. So let's look at that. One of the changes in 1.7 was to introduce the new DMTF WBEM server profile. It is a redesign of the SNIA server profile. The server profiles manage the interop namespace that contains registered profiles for implementations that conform to profile standards. The WBEM server profile is a better design for the functions. However, it requires the support of infrastructure, WBEM Solutions or Open Groups Pegasus. The top of this chart shows the layout of the SNIA server profile as it existed, and the bottom of this chart shows the layout of the WBEM server profile classes. The two profiles contain basically the same information, but the class layout in the WBEM server profile is considered better. One other point is the central class of the SNIA server profile is the SIM Object Manager, where the WBEM server profile, it is the SIM computer system. This is because the WBEM server profile specializes the DMTF computer system profile. In addition, In addition to the changes to the class structure, the related profiles for the WBEM server profile are different from the SNIA server profile. Most notably, the WBEM server profile introduces the use of the DMTF Simple Identity Management, DMTF Role-Based Authorization, and the DMTF IP interface profiles. The Simple Identity Management Profile is a mandatory profile that would be used to manage users and user groups. The Role-Based Authorization is a mandatory profile that is used for managing user roles and authorizations based on those roles. The IP interface profile may be used to manage the WBEM server protocol. Oops. I'm stuck. So that summarizes 1.7 and let's talk about 1.8. They were updates to the Fabric, Block, and Common Profiles book. So let's start with the Fabric book. The Fabric book had peer zoning, enhancements for peer zoning, and enhancements to port speed. So let's look at peer zoning. Peer zoning provides a new methodology that is called principal-to-peer communication. On the left of this chart is a regular zone, and on the right is a peer zone. Ports in the regular zone can all communicate with each other. Ports in the peer zone connect peer ports to principal ports. Each peer can communicate with the principal, but peer ports cannot communicate with each other. This basically means you create a zone with a single principal, and only the principal is able to see and talk to peers. The peers themselves are not allowed to see or talk to the other peers defined in the peer zone. In essence, a peer zone behaves like an ACL, access control list, applied on peer ports in a zone only to see the principal. The principal, however, has an ACL for all the peer member ports in that zone. Both a peer and a principal can be member of multiple zones, including non-peer zones, which could then alleviate the statement above that allow them to see and talk to each other. Multiple initiators that share access to a target are members of a peer zone where the target is specified as a principal and the initiators as peers. These updates are to the fabric and zone control profiles. Next, we have changes to port speeds in FC ports. The speed for FC ports has increased significantly. The enhancement recognizes new speeds of 16, 32, and 128 GFC. GFC stands for Generic Flow Control. These speeds are added in the FDMI and switch profiles. Next, we look at the block book. There are several changes in the block book. There are new methods in block services, new methods in group masking and mapping, a number of enhancements to replication services, a new method in volume composition, and advanced metrics was added to the block server performance profile. So let's look at these. Oops, went too far. A new method was added to block services to support composites. This new method provides client control over the actual construction of a composite element, such as a composite volume. This new method is an extension to the create or modify element from storage pool. It extends the method with three new parameters. You may supply the underlying elements, such as storage extents, with the in-elements array parameter. You may specify a method to use of the underlying elements with a composite type parameter. And you may specify the number of elements to use if in-elements is null. In new methods were added to group mapping and masking. These are two new convenience methods that were added to the profile. Move members allows members to be moved between groups in one operation rather than two. You used to have to remove and then add to accomplish the move. The create or modify masking group provides a method for modifying properties of a masking group rather than using the intrinsic modify instance method. Several enhancements were made to replication services. The new optional properties in SIM replication group sets rules on group membership, that's membership policy, and indicate whether the group is system generated or not. The SIM replication service capabilities has added adaptive and active variations to the supported replication types. Adaptive versions allow an implementation switch between synchronous and asynchronous modes based on the speed of the connection. Active means both source and target are simultaneously available to clients. In SIM replication setting data, the desired copy methodology is extended to include copy before activation and redirect on write. Copy on activation means start copying data in the background before activation. Redirect on write means new writes to the source or target elements are redirected to new locations, and only metadata is updated to point to the new location. And lastly, enumerations were added in SIM replication setting data for copy methodology in SIM synchronization aspect. And those enumerations are copy before activation and redirect on write. A new method was added to volume composition for creating composite elements. This new method provides client control over actual construction of composite elements. It extends the method for create or modify composite element with 4 new parameters: preserve data, helper element, in pools, and number of devices. The preserve data, if this parameter is set to true, the implementation will try to preserve the data on create or expand. The default is false. Helper element, if specified, it indicates an element that can be used as a helper element for certain operations, such as expanding a composite with data preservation. In pools specifies the pools where composite volume has to be created. If not specified, the system selects the appropriate pools. Number of devices specifies the number of composite volumes to be created. The capabilities changes are changes to support these new parameters. All right, advanced metrics. They were added to block server performance as a way to indicate better support for metrics. The block server performance provides basic performance statistics for block servers, such as an array. It is basic in that the minimum support is pretty minimal. The advanced metric feature defined by the block statistics capabilities supported features including 6, means more of the statistics are supported and some additional metrics are also supported. The new metrics are total hit IOs, read sequential IOs, read sequential hits, write sequential IOs, and write sequential hits. The basic metrics with stronger support requirements are K bytes transferred, IO time counter, read IOs, read hit IOs, read IO time counter, K bytes read, write IOs, write hit IOs, write IO time counter, K bytes written, and idle time counter. And lastly, in 1.8, is an update to the iSCSI target support profile in the Common Profile book. A new method was added to the iSCSI target ports profile to allow identification of computer system during the creation of an iSCSI protocol endpoint. The new method in SIM iSCSI configuration service is called Create SCSI Protocol Endpoint using CS. And it works like Create SCSI Protocol Endpoint, but has the additional property that allows the client to specify the storage processor, that is computer system, in which to associate the protocol endpoint via a hosted access point. This is particularly useful when the storage system contains multiple storage processors. And the addition of the other supported features property accommodates vendor feature extensions. So that summarizes 1.7 and 1.8. And we are recommending that vendors go directly to 1.8, skipping 1.7. The reasons for this are 1.7 has some missing SIM MOFs. These are mentioned in the list in this. The problem was we failed to get all the SIM MOFs or SNIA MOFs converted to SIM MOFs, and as a result, we're missing MOFs in the 1.7 schema. Another problem we faced was we failed to propagate material in specialized profiles. And those fixes have been added to 1.8, so they are in 1.8. In addition, we discovered several of the new profiles in 1.7 needed some fixing. That includes the memory profiles, the storage pool diagnostics, and even the web and server profile. And those fixes were put into 1.8. SNIA is also taking 1.8 to ISO and not 1.7, and that's because 1.8 is now available, and it makes more sense to take 1.8 than to take an older release. Finally, we don't want our developers working from a standard that has some errors. They will likely find it somewhat frustrating. You'll find that 1.8 is a lot clearer and a lot more precise. And that explains where we are. Do we have questions?
Mike, I think there's a few questions. One is there an SNIS developers forum? Are there any other resources available?
There is a Google group. I can't recall the name of it, but there is a Google group. You can probably find it on the SMIS page from the SMIS.
Yes, I believe you can, but it's also been entered as an attachment in the attachments and links area. So there are two links there that would matter. One is for the SMIS homepage, which will get you to a single public SNIA SMIS page, which gives you pointers to a lot of resources. And there's also, in the attachments area for this talk, there's an SMIS developers group pointer, which will take you right to the Google group that Mike mentioned. And let's see, I believe we've got one other question. If anyone would like to enter additional questions, just remember you just type them into the Bright Talk Ask a Question box and we will see them here. The other question was, when is the next Plug Fest? And I believe we will be having the next Plug Fest in Santa Clara in January. There's a SNIA symposium event which goes from January the 22nd through the 25th, I believe. And there will be a Plug Fest there during that time where people with SMIS implementations could come and do some of the interoperability testing.
And we have another, will you be submitting 1.8 to an international standards board? And the answer is yes. We will be submitting this to ISO. I don't know if we have a specific schedule on that done, but we will.
I believe the current plan is to have the spec out there for a couple of months to see if there are any errata found, and those will be rolled into the spec before we would send it to ISO. But the answer is absolutely yes.
Looks like we have one more question.
Any feedback from OEMs as to targeted support date for their arrays? I'm with Dell EMC, so I can always check internally. We can't, we don't have any specific dates from the vendors. We are encouraging them to show up at the Plug Fest in January to begin testing on 1.8.
Correct. And we're kind of, even if we did know, it's up to the vendors to make this information public. Yes, there's at least one vendor who is working on a 1.8 implementation has begun asking, so can I test this with the conformance testing program? And the answer is yes. The SMIS 1.8 CTP program is ready to go now, and would begin doing the conformance testing and certification very soon. But again, we can't really expose different vendors' time frames. But there's at least one out there, and we are expecting more. If there are any other questions, we can certainly go for answering. And it looks like perhaps not at this time. Anyway, if you do end up with additional questions, I would encourage you to go to the SMIS developers group and post your question there. Chances are you'll get a very good answer, including the one about, does anybody have an SMIS 1.8 implementation yet? That's a good place to ask it. And if there are no more, then no more questions, then thank you everyone for joining this Bright Talk session, and we hope you now have a better understanding of what SMIS 1.8 is and what it brings to the world of storage management, where it's becoming increasingly crucial for the management of storage to get things absolutely right. Remember that you can easily find more information about SMIS at that home page that's in the attachments. Again, that page is filled with links. Will take you to a lot of different resources which are are all related to SNIS. And lastly, please do take the time to rate this Bright Talk session. We hope that you have found it interesting and useful, and we thank you in advance for your positive reviews and comments. And remember to watch for more sessions about SNIA storage management in the near future.
Thank you all.
That wraps it.
Okay.
Thank you.